Good morning, everybody. My name is Benjamin Meyer, and I'm a scientist with Kenai Watershed Forum here in Soledad, Alaska. I'm the water quality coordinator for Kenai Watershed Forum, and this morning I'm going to share an overview of a couple different projects that we're currently involved with here. The theme that runs throughout all these different projects I'm going to share this morning is that water quality monitoring helps us make good decisions about protecting water. We can't know what's happening with our water if we don't take a look at it on a regular basis. Same ideas with doctor's checkups. And we rely on the Kenai River for so much. We aim to do everything we can to make sure it stays in good shape, both for ourselves and for future generations. First, a little bit about more broadly what Kenai Watershed Forum is. Water quality is just one part of what Kenai Watershed Forum does. Our mission statement is working together for healthy watersheds on the Kenai Peninsula, and we've been at it since 1997. That can get summed up in this phrase across the top here: research, restoration, and education. So this can mean many things, whether we're working hands-on with volunteers, removing invasive weeds, or facilitating culvert replacement to improve salmon habitat passage, or mapping salmon habitat, or putting on a festival that draws up to 10,000 people annually at Soledad Creek Park. These are all things that we do here at Kenai Watershed Forum. And by the numbers, here's what that looks like. There's 6 or 7 of us, researchers and staff. We've accumulated 14,000 volunteer hours, removed 30,000 pounds of debris, and educated over 35,000 kids and adults throughout the region. So the particular projects I'm involved with in my role as water quality coordinator are these couple here. The first one is the Kenai River Baseline Water Quality Monitoring Project. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about Kenai River beach bacteria monitoring, and then finally talk a little bit about the Vogel Lake Pike project and some baseline water quality monitoring we're doing out there. So first up, the Kenai River Baseline Water Quality Monitoring Project. This is some work that's been going on since the year 2000. The idea is to produce an annual report card for Kenai River water quality of sorts. This plan was generated as part of a much larger Alaska State Parks Management Plan in 1997, and there were many different scientists involved with generating this. And as a minimum, one of the actions that was recommended was to monitor water quality throughout the Kenai River twice a year. Just to cut to the point, overall water quality is quite good throughout the Kenai River watershed. But the data that we've collected over the years has helped to both identify challenges and propose some solutions in terms of things we've identified. So, for example, in the late 2000s, early 2010s, there was an issue identified with hydrocarbon pollution in the lower Kenai River. The source turned out to be these older 2-stroke motors that were popular with boats that go up and down the lower river. And the solution turned out to be to replace these older 2-stroke motors with newer 4-stroke motors that generate much less hydrocarbon pollution. So Kenai Watershed Forum helped facilitate a buyback program for these older motors and gave people cash trade out for their old motors to buy new ones. This is the kind of issue that could not have been recognized unless we had just been monitoring it consistently on a regular basis. An issue that we've identified more recently is gradual increases in the amount of copper and zinc pollution. In this case, both the source of the pollutants and the likely solutions are not quite as clear yet, but this is something that we're starting to pivot towards as an organization in terms of identifying the challenges and coming up with solutions. So what the numbers look like for this project is we rely on 10 different partner agencies throughout the region to help us do this sampling twice a year. We do it at 13 different sites throughout the watershed. We've been at it for 20 years, so we have a 20-year continuous data set of twice a year sampling. The data set includes 39 different types of substances that have been analyzed over the years. And there are 10,332 unique data points in our database at this point. We aim to conduct an analysis on all this information approximately every 5 years. The last one was published in 2014, so we're currently due for a new one. Hope you'll keep an eye out for that here sometime over the next year or so. Next project I'm going to talk a little bit about is the Lower Kenai River beach bacteria monitoring. This is a project we've been involved with since 2010, and the issue, as you can see from this pretty dramatic picture here on the left, is that the personal use dipnet fishery in the Lower Kenai River, which runs from July 10th to July 30th most years, draws over 20,000 participants annually, and there ends up being quite a bit of fish waste left on the beach. This fish waste in turn draw gulls that leave their fecal matter behind that then contributes to the elevated bacteria population, to the elevated bacteria concentrations in the lower river. So Kenai Watershed Forum has worked to sample 5 or so different sites in the lower river on a weekly basis throughout the summer. We in turn provide this data to the Department of Environmental Conservation, who uses it to make decisions about when public advisory should be issued. So to cut to the point on what the data means that we've collected so far is essentially your fish that you catch dip netting is safe, it is safe to eat, it is safe to fish, as long as you're not preparing raw sushi on the beach. You should treat your freshly caught fish the same way you would treat any sort of fresh fish. You should keep it cool and clean. Your fish is safe to eat as long as you're not eating it raw on the shore. So these data have not had a full retrospective analysis yet of all the data from 2010 to current. Reports published are typically based on 1 to 2 years of data at a time. But in summary, we've seen that some of the elevated bacteria populations are not exclusively the result of the dipnet fishery. There are some concentrations that happen at advisory levels, even not from July 10 to 2020. So we can't blame just the gulls coming and leaving their fecal matter behind on the elevated bacteria populations, but they're definitely an important part of the story, as you'll see in my next slide here. Current best management practices to deal with this issue include raking the beaches at night, which the city of Kenai has been performing, conducting outreach to educate the public about best practices, improving sanitation, having places for people to leave their trash, outhouses, etc. And on this next slide, I'm just going to give you a quick peek into what some of our data looks like. So in this graph, we're looking at 5 different boxes. Each one of these boxes labeled up top is a different sampling site with data from 2019 and 2020. And on the x-axis, we have different sampling dates. There's 4 different sampling dates per site. And on the y-axis, we have concentration of a species-specific gene biomarker. So the amount of DNA proportional to a particular species. So what we see in this graph is there's a lot of green, and that corresponds to gulls. So we see that gulls are overwhelmingly the source of fecal matter in the water samples that we've collected at these sites in 2019 and 2020. There's a little bit of red and blue too here. Those correspond to dog and human sources. And we see a little bit of those at the North and South Kenai Beach too, which underscores the importance of educating the public about best sanitation practices. This data is currently provisional. The reports should be published sometime soon, but it's currently provisional. The next project I'm going to talk about a little bit is this Vogel Lake Pike project. So on to the next slide here. So invasive pike are a species of fish that threaten freshwater salmon habitat in South Central Alaska. Pike can really decimate salmon populations south of the Alaska Range if they are introduced. On the other hand, north of the Alaska Range, that is still within their native range, and there has been time for salmon and pike to reach an evolutionary balance of some sort. Not so in South Central Alaska. If they are introduced, they can quickly decimate native salmon populations. So this pike over here on the right is from Alexander Lake. This lake saw pike introductions in the last century and has since really decimated a lot of the native salmon populations in the Alexander Lake area. It's been a very long and expensive process to try to mitigate that problem. So pike were discovered in Vogel Lake north of Nikiski in 2019. And the idea is to hopefully have caught this issue several decades earlier than it was caught at Alexander Lake. Here we're looking at a map of where Vogel Lake is. So down in the lower right corner, we see the location of Vogel Lake. On this red dot, we're almost closer to Anchorage here at the very north of the peninsula. These lakes and creeks have native sockeye, coho, rainbow trout, and other salmonids present. The environmental assessment for how to address this issue is currently in progress, and there'll be a public meeting to learn more about it in spring 2021. So keep an eye out on the State Fish and Game website. Kenai Watershed Forum's role in this project is to collect water quality data at some of the areas where pike have been identified and nearby. So we've been out there once so far in January 2021, drilled some holes in the ice, dropped a hydrolab sonde down into the ice. This is a device that measures different parameters like dissolved oxygen, pH, conductivity, temperature, and we took measurements at 1 meter depth intervals. And this information is going to be used to help determine best course of action for how to address the invasive pike population. So what's ahead for Kenai Watershed Forum? What I want to share with you is that it really depends on you. We are always looking for new ways to connect with the community, both locally and beyond, and to work together towards making the Kenai a place that we can all live and thrive in for generations to come. So please be in touch if you have ideas and energy for what you want to see in your community. Over on the right, we're looking at a rain garden. So this is a stormwater installation that allows water from urban environments to bioinfiltrate through a lot of the soil. And the idea is to remove a number of contaminants before it would flow into surrounding rivers and lakes. And we are hoping to look into these as some potential green infrastructure that could be of use in the Kenai River watershed. So I have a lot of people to thank that have helped us out with all these projects. I think I've got just about everybody's logo up here. I won't name them all individually, but point is we rely on help from the whole community to make these projects I described happen. And finally, just want to say thank you again. Please email us anytime. I'm at ben@kenaiwatershed.org. You can check out our website, and we have all kinds of social media too. So thank you everyone for your time.